I was incredibly inspired by my dad's spirit during his cancer journey. But the truth is, he was getting me ready. Welcome to Spirit and Truth. So I'm honored to have you here, Kris, because I know that your schedule is bananas right now.
Sure is.
With what you're doing and everything. But if you'd like to take it a second or so, man, and just let the folks know who you are and what it is that you're doing at this time with the in the prostate cancer universe. So
Absolutely. Well, thank
sure.
you so much for having me, Kipper. Always great to get to catch up with you, chop it up. It
Yes.
means a lot to me to be on here with you. I appreciate everything you're doing in this space as well. So my name is Kris Bennett. I'm actually the new director of health equity initiatives over at Movember. So Movember is a men's health organization, a global men's health organization. I'm specifically right now tasked with some of their global efforts with prostate cancer health equity. So that looks a little bit differently right now, because Movember is a foundation. So we are granting out a lot of really good, right now, looking at a lot of really good projects that are kind of taking place across the globe. And I'm really looking at those health equity efforts and figuring out which ways, the funding can go to these organizations in different places that are kind of doing the work on the ground. So really just looking at those health equity efforts to make sure that folks are getting the resources and tools that they need to be able to help kind of eliminate some of those disparities that exist in the space.
Yes.
I think it's one thing, obviously, you and I talk a lot about are those disparities that exist, but something that I care deeply about, especially when it comes to Black folks and our communities across the space. So that's essentially what I'm doing in a nutshell. I've been at Movember for just about a week. So definitely not an expert in all things Movember right this second, but really excited to be there, and really excited to kind of scale the work that I've been able to do previously on the national stage, now globally.
Awesome. So when we talk about, like you said, you and I have had several
Mhm.
conversations about the inequities
Yes.
and disparities in the prostate cancer universe. So let's kind of talk about that a bit.
Yeah.
I know that the statistic I know for general,
Hmm.
um, in general, let's just say,
Yeah.
is one in every 3 or 4 men
Hmm.
will confront prostate cancer in some aspect. But then when we talk about, especially Black men
Yeah.
in the African American
Yep.
diaspora, we're talking about that tends to shrink, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and then with us being only 14% of the national population, but
Hmm.
I think you want to speak to that. I mean,
Yeah.
how that kind of actually works.
Yeah, so absolutely. So that generally, American Cancer Society. So I'll speak just pretty much for the United States. So ACS, the American Cancer Society, generally has that number at about 1 in 8 men for total. So that's
Hmm.
1 in 8 men, regardless of race or ethnicity. And that number shrinks down a lot when it comes to Black men. So
Hmm.
the newest numbers that came out are about 1 in 6-ish, and really can get to 1 in 4 in different countries. So in the United Kingdom, for example, that number does shrink down to about 1 in 4.
Wow.
And so that is a massive jump. That's actually the reason why previously, prior to all of this work, I'd worked in the health equity space, just as a general health equity, working on programs. And so when I actually heard about the disparities and the numbers in the prostate cancer space, outside of my personal stuff that I have with my family, that really drew me to it. So there's a lot of different factors that kind of play into why that number shrinks down so much and
Hmm.
why it's so prevalent in the Black communities. Whether that is, I like to look at things from more of the perspective of outside of the medical side of things. So,
Hmm.
of course, there's like there's the biological factors that play into it. There are biological, studies and research that do point to some of the biological stuff and differences within people.
Hmm.
But a lot of the reasons in which I've heard, and this is just these are from my experiences getting to travel the country and getting to talk to folks. There are those pieces of distrust. So the medical distrust that Black communities have, with their providers and with health systems. Rightfully so, right? I think a lot of us talk about Henrietta Lacks, a lot of us talk
Yes,
about the Tuskegee, experiment, but a lot of that stuff still exists, right?
absolutely.
There's bias within healthcare systems. There is, like providers don't get the same levels of training. So there's a lot of things that really do play into it. But I would say the biggest things that I've heard so far are distrust, lack of resources within specific communities and areas. I'm a big believer in, when you're talking about disparities, you have to look at things from a geographical perspective too. So race and place-based disparities exist, and those are some of the biggest things that I see a lot of and hear a lot of. And then, of course, there's the bias, there's medical racism that still exists within things. I think people look at racism from that individual lens, and in reality, especially in the United States. I'm learning this now a lot globally, right?
Mhm,
In the United States, I mean, racism is unfortunately kind of ingrained in everything within our country.
mhm.
So it just from a larger perspective, that is something that we do have to kind of keep our eyes on and understand that when people are talking about these types of things, it's important to A, validate it, but then also B, figure out what we can do to kind of help remedy those things. So that's where my role really comes in. So I look at things from kind of that macro lens, that bigger perspective of, okay, how can we help eliminate some of those disparities and some of those issues that are kind of contributing to these, to the inequities that a lot of folks are facing.
Very good. I just kind of having to had to go through this this whole journey for the
Yeah.
last 3 years.
Yeah.
Like one of the things that I saw is not necessarily the same attention paid
Mm.
to black prostate cancer patients in terms of, for instance, I had I don't know, you've met David Moffat, I
Yeah.
believe, in his Courage
Yep.
and Strength
Yep.
platform that he has. And he had a forum a couple of weeks ago, and there was a young Hispanic gentleman who
Yep.
was on the panel, on the survivors panel with me. He's 39 years old. He's a prostate cancer survivor at 39 years old, which says to me that uh, we're missing out
Yeah.
perhaps on an earlier detection
Yes.
situation. So are
Yes.
we even paying attention that we as black and brown men have to maybe test earlier
Hmm.
for prostate cancer than our European counterparts,
Yeah.
or that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um, so I think my question is, how do we address that disparity? And I know you're working on a more global level now, so you're even
Yeah.
seeing more
Yeah.
of the diaspora, as it were.
hmm
So how do
hmm
we address like the earlier detection methods when they're just telling us, oh, well, you don't need to test till 40 or 45 or whatever, and it is kind of disheartening and kind of adds to the distrust or mistrust, as you say,
Yeah.
of the healthcare systems when they're saying these kinds of numbers, as opposed to, no, we probably need to be testing at 30,
Yeah.
you know.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
I was going to say, what does that look like in terms of changing that information?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. And I think that's something that, to your point, it definitely contributes to the distrust and mistrust of the healthcare system. I'm a big believer in the fact that when it comes to these types of things, the medical system, unfortunately, has done this to historically and intentionally excluded communities for, since the beginning of time, right? And so I
Mhm,
think that's something that we need to acknowledge and recognize.
mhm,
And then also, I think it really does. We have to put the onus on the medical system to, instead of the medical system saying like, hey, we're gonna, let's extend this olive branch and it be an equal thing. Like the medical system actually has to be the folks that are extending that olive branch to the communities because of this history, right? So to really kind of address that question that you have, I think it's really important that we kind of start from who's creating those guidelines, right?
mhm,
So the U.S. Preventative Task Force in the United States are actually the folks that is the kind of governing body that is passing along the guidelines to what age and which people are going to be screened. So they do this, they have their system that's in place. I couldn't tell you, I don't know that much about what the technical pieces are, but essentially, their guidelines suggest getting tested and screened, PSA screened, at the age of about 50, right? And to
Mm.
your point, black and brown men, black and brown folks with a prostate, listen, this is something that, again, historically has continued to happen where, we are diagnosed, or we're not even diagnosed, right? We are actually, we tend to have prostate cancer or can tend to have prostate cancer at a significantly younger age. And so for us, it is so important, it is so critical to your point, right? To get screened earlier. And so I think this is a twofold kind of question. This is something that I've got my master's in public health, and I think for me, I'm really big on preventative pieces. And so for me, I'm like, hey, how do we address this at an earlier stage, right? How do we
Mm.
prevent folks from, getting to that piece of, oh, now I'm diagnosed with prostate cancer, or if I am diagnosed, because that is fine, right? You can be diagnosed with prostate cancer, and as you know, you can survive, you can thrive, right? That is a very strong possibility. This is not to scare people. We want to make sure that they're getting screened. We want to make sure that they're getting access to the information and then access to the resources they need to thrive. So in order to do that, we've got to get screened earlier, right? We've got to make sure that we're pushing that message out. So I think this is a from a public health perspective, this is something that we need to do a better job of societally, of pushing out that message, right?
Mm.
If you do have a history of prostate cancer in your family, chances are likely that you will unfortunately inherit that, right? So that is something that you want to make sure that you're paying attention to. You want to know your baseline numbers. You want to kind of keep your finger on the pulse, if you will, for getting PSA tests. Also, black men, like we mentioned earlier, are more likely to be diagnosed with prostate cancer at a younger age. And so these are the types of things that we want to make sure that we're getting that information out there to folks. Also, one other thing that I think doesn't get talked a lot about, is the fact that if somebody in your family, mother, sister, auntie, anything like that does have breast cancer, there's this thing called BRCA mutation. So
Mm.
BRCA1 and 2 mutations, and if somebody in your family does have that, again, chances are likely that you might be diagnosed for prostate cancer. And if you are diagnosed for prostate cancer, there's actually a chance that it could be a more aggressive form of prostate cancer. So, in order to really avoid all of that, we want to make sure that we're getting PSA testing earlier. We want to have those types of conversations within our community, right? I mean, I laugh at the fact that so my grandmother's from the south side of Chicago. I laugh at the amount of times that we've had these types of conversations, and especially in Black communities, right? We'll hear, oh, uncle, whatever just had cancer, right? We don't talk
Mm.
about the type of cancer. We don't talk about any of that, right?
Right.
So I think, within our communities, I would really love to see us starting to like normalize these kinds of conversations, right? To socialize it a little bit more. I understand, trust me, my mother was diagnosed with breast cancer. She is a cancer survivor, thriver, all of that. A lot of my really great friends, I consider David Moffat a great friend of mine. I consider you, Kipper, a great friend of mine. A lot of y'all have been diagnosed with cancer, right? And so but you're all thrivers, right? And that's the piece that I want to get out to folks is don't be scared of this. Use this as information to then be able to say, hey, I'm arming myself with this knowledge. So if this does happen to me, or if this does happen to somebody in my community, I know what to do to point them in the right direction. I know what to do for myself, to really empower myself, right? So I definitely urge folks to continue to get tested, from a macro side, on a bigger side, continue to, I know a lot of folks don't want to get into political business, right? But the U.S. Preventative Task Force are the members who are making those decisions. And so it is important to continue to go to your representatives and talk to them about why prostate cancer, PSA testing for all, is something that we should do, right? Eliminate those cost sharing benefits. There's actually a PSA for Him Act, that was at zero prostate cancer. That's something that I would urge everybody to go to talk to folks about, because we know there are barriers to testing, right? Especially in this country, we want to make sure we're eliminating some of those barriers. But we also want to talk about, how do we reduce that age to something that's younger, right? So then people are getting tested. So, like
Mm.
I said, it's really the information is really critical to know, push that message out to folks. I'm 33 years old, man. I talk to my friends all the time about prostates and prostate health, and trying to normalize that conversation, right?
Yes.
Because again, you don't want to get to a situation where you are 50 years old and you didn't know what was going on, but there's not a lot of signs with prostate cancer, unfortunately. And then you do get a diagnosis, and now you're diagnosed at stage 3 or stage 4 when you could have had, you could have kind of been getting that baseline PSA test when you were, mid 30s, early 40s, and then you would have caught it earlier, and it would have just been a significantly easier process. And again, that's not to scare anybody. I really want to be very clear of that. I just want to make sure that folks are getting tested. I want to make sure that our communities, right, like all the folks, that look like us, our Black and brown brothers and sisters, that they're getting information that they need to then go get tested, make sure they're screened, and make sure that they can live a healthy life, right? I've heard
Absolutely.
it. I've heard it. I actually heard it at Impact Church, right? Um, there was a woman I went to a session, and there was a woman who said, you know what, we want our brothers here, right? We want our brothers here. So if that means that we have to talk about this, and I know it's an uncomfortable subject because Black men in particular, I know we want to be Superman, we don't want to talk about those types of things. But it's real, right? We want to make sure that we're having the real conversations. And that, again, that's why I genuinely value what you're doing, Kipper, right? Using your platform to talk about these types of things,
Mhm.
because these aren't conversations that we're normally having. So let's change that. Let's start to socialize it a little bit more. And the information is out there for us. We've got really good folks that do have access to resources and can connect us with those resources. So again, try to go get your PSA test. It's a simple blood test. There's the misconception of the DRE, which is that finger swipe. I'll be honest with you, from everybody that I know, from R. Frank Jones, and that's an incredible Black urologist group, to the AUA, American Urological Association. I don't know a ton of urologists out there that are saying they want to do the finger swipe anymore. It's all PSA blood test because that is your first line of defense, and it's so much easier, and it's also so effective. So I want to, if anything, I want to help kind of eliminate some of those misconceptions, some of that distrust within the system. I get it. I'm a Black man myself. I deal with it, right? Nobody
Mhm.
knows that nobody can see that I have 3 master's degrees when I get stopped by the police, right? I get it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So I want to make sure that folks know, listen, we have access to those resources, we have access to those tools, and I want us to be empowered enough to be able to go out there and do the things that we need to do for our health, so then we can continue to contribute to our communities.
Yeah, I agree with you about the rectal digital exam as well,
Hmm.
because I did both. I did
Yep.
the RDE and then the PSA. My urologist, who was a brilliant Nigerian doctor,
Hmm.
Dr. Orojo here at Emory,
Okay.
formerly at Emory. She's
Hmm.
now moved on, but she felt nothing in the RDE. But when
Yeah.
we did the PSA, my PSA was 20
Oh, wow.
at the
Yeah.
at that first check, and so that I would just venture to say that the PSA, which is the blood test, is a simple
Hmm.
blood test, is much more articulate in what it can discover,
Yeah.
because it's going to show,
Yeah.
even what the RDE doesn't feel, because it is a very quick swipe, and it's not,
Hmm.
people are intimidated by just the very
Yeah.
thought of it and that kind
Yeah.
of thing. Well, the blood test is much more articulate in its discovery
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I appreciate you saying that. Um, but and something else you said too. You said, the onus is on the medical community
Yeah.
for,
Yeah.
for this kind of thing. I tend to believe that, and to your point, you were talking about, like, the legislative part of it,
Yeah. Yeah.
with the U.S. Prevention Task Force. Um, I really tend to think that the onus really is on those of us who are survivors, who are
Mhm.
engaged in the fight right now. I think
Yeah.
that, it's really kind of up to us to kind of move the needle,
Yes.
as it were, because uh, we've seen the history of the medical community, and especially when it comes to us, they
Hmm.
tend to think that we have a higher tolerance for pain,
Yeah.
a lower threshold for even being examined for anything, and so those kinds of things. So I think it's really, the onus is really on us
Yeah.
to get the
Yeah.
word out, to
Yeah.
explain to people what the process is. Yes, there is an extremely high survival rate with early detection and
Hmm.
early treatment, But if when people hear the word cancer,
Yeah.
they just freak out and they just think death sentence
Yeah.
because we've seen so much in our families of people
Mhm.
just, well, what happened to Uncle so and so, like you said, well, he
Yeah.
had
Yeah.
cancer and we don't
Yeah.
know what it was, you
Right.
know what I mean? It was just
Right.
cancer.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I was fortunate enough with my father to go through his journey with him. He was extremely proactive
Hmm.
in his
Hmm.
journey because he was being besieged by different cancers along his way. It was first colon cancer. They
Yep.
got rid of it and then found it a spot in his kidney. They removed a kidney. He had one kidney for years. He was still playing golf.
Yeah.
Um, and then it was his bladder. They treated it, got rid of it. But he was like, wait a minute, why does this continue to happen? Why am I having
Yeah.
all these different cancers if they got rid of it? And so when he moved, finally, we moved him here to Georgia from California.
Hmm.
His oncologist here had the foresight to say, "Hey, I want to do this genetic testing
Yeah.
and find out what is actually going on
Yeah.
and causing this to happen."
Yeah.
And we found out that what he had was something called Lynch syndrome.
Mm.
And that's Lynch for anybody who's listening. But Lynch syndrome is actually a defective gene, usually found in Europeans and Native Americans, which is really
Yeah.
interesting because we have both in my bloodline. But
Okay.
Lynch syndrome is what they call a defective gene that allows for all of
Hmm.
these specific cancers. And when they say allows for, it is the way that they explain it is every human body has cancer,
Yeah.
every human body. However, the healthy human body response is to always keep it at bay. It never shows, you never know anything about it. But this particular defective gene basically swings the gate open and says, oh, right this way.
Yeah.
And so then we end up having, these different specific cancer issues or
Hmm.
can have.
Hmm.
And so is it genetic? Yes. Does every child of a Lynch syndrome person have cancer? Not necessarily.
Right.
So again, it's about the testing, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I don't know. I mean, my health insurance allowed me to do the genetic test to find out. Sure enough, I tested positive for Lynch
Yeah.
syndrome.
Yeah.
Now, before I got my prostate cancer diagnosis,
Hmm.
my sister
Yeah.
was already diagnosed and already in treatment for breast cancer.
Mm.
To your point
Hmm.
with the BRCA
Yeah. Yeah.
situation, and then she
Yeah.
did the genetic test and found out that she too tested positive for Lynch syndrome.
Interesting.
This is probably not as uncommon as we think.
Yeah.
Um, kind of a side note, when we're talking about Black and Brown people who indigenously are not from this country,
Yes.
um, I tend to think that since we've been here, we have adapted a diet, we have
Yep.
adapted a routine
Yes.
of life that is
Yeah.
not native to us.
Yes.
And so now we have to deal with this situation of,
Hmm.
these cancer diagnoses, and
Yeah.
we're going, well, why is it happening to us so early?
Really.
How
Yeah.
about we're not from here? And
Hmm.
so, so we're doing that. So there are a couple of things in the genetic testing,
Yeah.
and then our genetic makeup,
Yeah.
that kind of, I think, speak to the reason why we need this earlier detection. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? And if
Yeah.
and whoever's listening, again, I think that if you can if your health insurance covers a genetic
Mhm.
testing, I even think it's only like maybe $250 or something like
Yeah.
that to do the genetic test. But it is
Yeah.
great to find out because once again, early detection can save your life. With prostate
Yes.
cancer, I think we're at 98% now.
98%. Yeah.
Uh,
Almost
ni-
almost 90. It's like pretty much 99%. Yeah.
there
Pretty
we
much.
are.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know if you want to speak to that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, no,
But
I think I'm so glad you brought that up because I think that is something that, again, so my dad, musician, I know Kipper, I know you, my dad are familiar with each other.
absolutely.
He grew up on the south side or on the west side of Chicago, rather, hung with a lot of Black Panther cats. And I think, one thing that they always talked about that he always tells me and that my mom is so good about is, having access to information, right? My
Yes.
mom was an educator, always talking about that. And one thing that she always talked about, and also my father talked to me a lot about, was, you want to have access to information, and essentially, history repeats itself, right?
Hmm.
So that's something that my dad always took from the Panthers. That's something that my mom always kind of gave to me. And I think this is our opportunity as Black and brown folks, right? Because we don't always have that access to our history and to our roots, right?
Hmm.
To really take that back, right? And that's what genomic testing and these kinds of tests will provide us with, right? We want to be the kind of trailblazers in this history, right? Like we want to write our own history, and really the only way that we're going to do that is by knowing what's kind of going on in our family trees, and what's going on with our family history of these types of things. So I'm so glad you brought that up. I'm a big proponent of it. I know it's something that a lot of folks are nervous or potentially scared of because of previous things that happened in the past. But I will say there are some, and one thing about me that I didn't mention is, I do have a background working in the political space, and so I can tell you about all of the legality pieces that are around genomic testing, and they can't share these types of things. They can't just collect your medical breakdown of everything, of all of your genes, and what is making, and what really goes into what you are as a human being. They can't collect that. They're not selling that information.
Hmm.
We want to do the research on what we, might potentially want to join in terms of, genomic testing or anything like that. But there are so many great genomic testing, clinical trials that are out there. One thing that I do like to tell folks, if they are a little hesitant, is don't do it, not, do it for yourself. Obviously, we want to make sure you're doing it for yourself, but do it for your family, right? Do it for your community, because you're going
Yes.
to know, if you do have a son, right? Or if you do have a daughter, or if just anybody, right? If you do get this kind of genomic testing, you're going to get that information back. And then you'll be able to share that information, to kind of wrap it all in a pretty bow. That's what I meant by, like knowledge is power, right?
Yes.
Understanding your history is power, right? Like that is what I try to tell people is like, you know what? I understand you might be a little hesitant. I get it. I'm not at all saying go jump out to everything and trust everything you hear on the streets. Like that's not what I'm about. Like I understand it. I get it. But what I am saying is you can own that, right? You can write your own history. You can be the one that's in charge of that. And this is our time to do that, right? There's never been another time in history where Black and brown folks have had this much control over pretty much anything, right? So
Hmm.
I want to say to folks that are out there, if you are listening to this, take control of that. Take advantage of the clinical trials that are out there, right? They are eager to let people in. There are so many great genomic testing, trials that are out there. I know there's one going on. Actually one going on out there right now for people to become genetic testing coaches, right? So we can actually have people, Black and brown folks, black and brown men that are out there that are getting this information and then being able to share it with other folks that are out there in the community. So I want to make sure that folks know those types of things are out there, they exist. Again, like knowledge is power, understanding these types of things is power. But don't do it just for yourself. Do this for your community. Do this for your family. Do this for people that are, that for people that aren't even born yet, right? Like
Yeah.
we want to make sure that we're doing that. So then we're continuing to ensure that folks are healthy and happy.
Yeah, the responsibility of it, I get it. I mean,
Yes. Yes.
I'm to your point. I'm participating in a clinical trial right
Love that.
now regarding Alzheimer's.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
That's
because
incredible.
yeah, they had a men's health forum at Emory, and
Hmm.
they asked if anybody wanted to participate, in a brain health study,
Yeah.
and I was like, well, I think a large part of the issue, and especially with us again,
Hmm.
why they don't have drugs that are targeted to us,
Yeah.
they don't have
Yeah.
therapies that are targeted to us, is because we don't participate in those trials. And so
Yeah.
there's nothing really particularly germane to us
Yeah.
because we don't have any input in
Hmm.
how these things are developed.
Hmm.
So I said that I would take part in that, for that same reason.
Yeah.
And again, that responsibility. I shared my the whole documentation from my genetic testing
Yeah.
with my entire family. I put it in a
Yeah.
folder, put it in a
Yeah.
Google
Yeah.
Drive, told
Yeah.
everybody, give me your email address. I have something for
Hmm.
you. I sent it to
Hmm.
all my cousins because
Nice.
not only did my dad eventually passed from, it was esophageal that finally,
Okay.
it was his final bout with cancer. But my grandfather, my dad's brother, my uncle, all of my grandmother's brothers but one, and she had like five,
Oh, wow.
six brothers altogether. All of them but one, all
Yeah.
died from colorectal cancer.
Yep. Yep.
So I send it to all my cousins. If you send me your email address, I will send you my genetic testing. I want
Yes.
you to know so that you can be
Yes.
proactive as well.
Yes.
And to your point, I got like zero response.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll say 98% response because
Yeah.
my first cousin Philip and I are very close and we
Okay.
talk,
Yeah.
about it, and
Yeah.
he's been very proactive in his
Yeah.
colonoscopies and all of
Hmm.
that. And we're the same age.
Yeah.
I'm 62 now. He just turned 62 last week. I'm super grateful for Counter Narrative Project giving me this opportunity to bring up this topic and talk about my journey as well. I don't think that in the LGBTQ community that we
Hmm.
talk enough about this challenge, this issue as well. I think that this gives me the opportunity to kind of really bring it up
Yeah.
and let everyone know that this exists in every aspect of where men exist.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so, I as a member of the LGBTQ community, I want to make sure that we address it there too, and
Yes.
that that you don't have to be silent. This is not
Hmm.
just some testosterone driven man conversation. This is
Yeah.
for every male that exists, and
Yes.
especially every man of color. And
Yes.
and so I really want to talk about that too.
Yeah, yeah,
So
absolutely. And I think that is, that's one thing that I actively write. So you might have heard me say earlier, I quickly corrected myself when I said, men, I will say anyone with a prostate, right? Because to your
yes,
point, we want to be inclusive of folks. We want to make sure that folks have that information. Doesn't matter how you identify, what you identify. I will constantly always say partners because that is something that's meaningful to this work, right?
yes.
We want to have our partners lifting us up. We want to be able to have these kinds of conversations because I don't, to your point, it's not highlighted, it's not lifted up enough. So I'm, again, really appreciative of you highlighting that and uplifting that because everyone's voice is important here. Anybody with a prostate, does not matter how you identify, we're all susceptible to it. And we want to make sure that we're getting those resources. And there are incredible resources out there for everybody.
The fear factor.
Yeah. Yeah.
Again, when you hear that word cancer, people just,
Yeah.
tend to run away. And
Hmm.
it's like, well, running away is going to lead you to be in that 1.5 to 2%
Yes.
of not being a survivor. So,
Yeah.
I think run to the
Run to.
survival
Hmm.
time, the
Hmm.
survival pack is where you
Yeah.
want to be. Like I said, when I was first, when I got my PSA back, it was 20.
Yeah.
Alarm bells, yeah, but
Hmm.
my urologist then booked the MRI and the biopsy immediately and said, listen, we're going to test again in a couple of weeks. It could be
Hmm.
something making your PSA very high.
Yep.
And then when we tested in 2 weeks, it was 21. So
Hmm.
we knew we were going to have to go ahead and do the biopsy and the
Yeah.
MRI,
Yeah.
but we were already on the schedule to do it.
Yep.
And I don't know. I think maybe because of my dad, the fear factor wasn't as prevalent for me. I
Hmm.
just knew that whatever it
Yeah.
was I was going to
Yeah.
have to do, I was going to have to do it.
Right.
You
Right.
know what I mean? And
Right.
so we went right in. My urologist, Dr. Arojo, said that my probably best option was going to be surgery. And when I
Yeah.
say surgery, I'm talking about the radical prostatectomy.
Hmm.
Um, and again, at that point, I was 60. Um, I'm probably past childbearing age.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
or my
Yeah.
desire to have a kid
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah.
But I will say this, and since we're in this very candid situation,
Yeah.
that they gave me the opportunity to put some semen on storage
Yeah. Yeah.
if I wanted
Yeah.
to do something later, and so
Hmm.
I took advantage of that.
Good.
But whatever it was, I knew for my health and
Yeah.
for my life, if I wanted to extend my lifespan,
Hmm.
surgery would be my best option, even
Yeah.
after my consultation with my radiology oncologist,
Yeah.
because they told me that if I do surgery, there is the outside chance that I would probably have to do some radiation as well, because
Mm-hmm.
when they remove your prostate gland, it is also attached to lymph nodes, and they try to
Yep.
get as many of the lymph nodes as they can. Some of them they can't access, being that they could be attached to nerves or
Yep.
anything like that, and so they might have to do some radiation treatment
Yeah.
after,
Right.
just to make sure that they get your PSA to undetectable, which is point 0,
Yeah.
or at 0. So mine has been point
Yeah.
zero 0.01. But even the radiology oncologist suggested that's what you want to do. You want to do the
Yeah.
surgery. Doing anything else is just it could prolong
Yeah.
your treatment. It could exacerbate, and
Yeah.
anything could happen.
Yeah.
So that's what I opted for, and that's what I did, was the surgery.
To bring this conversation closer to home, Kipper recorded a short update the morning his catheter was removed after surgery. It's a candid moment that captures what recovery can feel like. Let's listen.
Today was a good day. Started out crazy because I get a call at 8 o'clock this morning. Mr. Jones, you can come in this morning to have your catheter removed. Yay! But you got to come to Johns Creek for 10 o'clock. This was 8 o'clock, which means I have to get up, get showered, get out of here. I don't care. I moved heaven and earth. Still didn't get here till almost 11, but they did it. I am now free of all physical encumbrances. And yeah, let the healing begin starting today. So I'm just very grateful today for the whole procedure so far. Grateful to Dr. Rojo and her staff, and all the professional medical people that have helped me get this far, and everyone else who has prayed for me and pulled for me during this period. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you. And I'll be keeping you posted. We'll talk soon. Love you. Bye.
That was Kipper, recorded shortly after surgery. Now, back to his conversation with Kris. I had to do like 7.5 weeks of radiation from
Mm-hmm.
February to April last year,
Yeah.
and since then I've been at point 0.01,
Yeah.
which is
So,
which is
yeah.
perfect.
It is.
There are some after effects from
Yeah.
the radiation.
Mm-hmm.
Well, because you also have to do the hormone therapy,
Yeah.
and people that go through the radiation just know that when you're being treated, they also have prostate cancer feeds off of
Yeah.
testosterone, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they have to eliminate the testosterone from your body while you're being treated. So for a middle-aged guy like myself, when your testosterone is eliminated, you're going to get pretty much all of the same things that a middle-aged woman gets.
Mm-hmm.
The hot flashes,
Yeah.
emotional outbursts, all
Yeah.
those things, right?
Yeah.
And lack of energy.
Mm-hmm.
And so that being, it is temporary.
Yeah.
It all comes back. The incontinence piece,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to deal with that for a while, and those kinds of things. But again, we're talking about surviving
Yeah.
this issue,
Yeah. Yeah.
not just, these things aren't permanent,
Yeah.
and that kind of thing. So I'm on the back end of that, and
Yeah.
so I just
I
want to
love
share
that.
that as well, because that's, I think that's part of the intimidation factor, that people get
Yeah.
very, oh, well, I don't, I'm not going to be able to, have sex again, or I'm
Yeah.
not. No, you will. It just,
Yeah.
it's a thing that has to come back on its own, and
Mm-hmm.
it will,
Yeah. And
and
yeah.
so.
Yeah, and I thank you so much for sharing that, because I think that is, I hear it all the time, but I think especially as, anybody that identifies as a man, right? Like some of the biggest things we can do to really show strength is be vulnerable, right?
Yes,
That is
yes.
a piece of the strength. And so I love having those types of conversations. I love hearing the openness and the transparency that comes along with it,
Mhm.
because there are going to be times when it's challenging. Like, no one says that, and none of this, sometimes people react way differently than others, right? Some of this might be a breeze for some folks, and some of it might be more challenging for others. But I will say, you know what? To your point, this is about survival. To what I had said, to what I had mentioned earlier of the woman who had mentioned this at Impact Church in Atlanta. they want us here, right? Our people want us here. Our people want us to be surviving. Into what I tell people all the time that talk about, oh, well, what about the sex piece?
Hmm.
I understand, I get it, right? But I've never heard anybody that is 6 feet deep complain about sex, right? So we want to make sure that, we're putting ourselves, like you said, run to the survival, right? Run to survival, run to the known, run
Yes.
to the known, right? It might be scary. Everything that is great tends to be scary, right? So we want to make sure that we're running towards that. And so I love that you shared that. I think it is so critically important, genuinely. I think it is so critically important for folks to hear that, both the good and the bad, right?
Hmm.
Because a lot of times we talk about this, we talk about it so, blase, blase. And then when it happens to people, they're like, hey, no one told me about the side effects. Hey, no one told me about this. No one told me that it was going to be more challenging. No one told me this was going to be hard on my mental, right?
Hmm.
So I love that you're opening up this conversation because I do think it provides people the opportunity to hear that, hey, yeah, it might be challenging, but I'm going to get through this, right? It is going to pass. Like, you will get set up with the people that are going to help you, progress and come back stronger, right? And on top of all of that, which I think is the biggest thing that gets lost in a lot of this, is you're going to survive, and that is the biggest gift, right?
Yes.
So thank you so much for sharing that, man. Seriously.
Yeah. I again, by me sharing my genetic testing with my cousins
Hmm.
and my family, my whole thing is it's okay. So it's not about you, really. It isn't. It's about your kids. It's about
Yes.
your family. It's about the ones that are going to need you here, and
Right.
and that's the important part to me. Um, yeah, I mean, I grew up in the entertainment business, so I'm tough. It's just
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
there's not
Gotta
a whole
be.
lot.
Gotta be.
You know what I mean?
Gotta
There's
be.
not a whole
Yeah.
lot you're gonna say to me to really
Yeah.
get me knock me off my horse.
Yeah.
So that's not a thing for me. But but I know for a lot of men, and especially those of us who have families, you're going to be challenged in other ways, not just your health, but it's like, oh my God,
Hmm.
I'll be out of work. How am I going to provide for my family? I'm going to,
Yeah.
those kinds of things. I mean, and I know that's all part of the thought process is
Yeah.
when someone is diagnosed.
Hmm.
Yeah. So I was going to ask you too, can we,
Yeah.
talk about like resources and those
Yeah.
kinds of things,
Absolutely.
you know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that brings up a lot of really great conversation, especially on the, mental health side of things, right? I think
Mhm.
one thing that I continuously learn and hear about, especially when it comes to any kind of cancer, but especially anything that's affecting men, right? When it comes to men's health, one of the biggest things tends to be that strength that comes with being a man, right? Like that idea, these ideologies that we have, it's just naturally, right, within
Mhm.
societal values, especially in American culture, being a man and being a black man, or being a brown man, like, you are seen as a provider, you're seen as this person with a lot of strength. So when something does happen to you, you're never conditioned to think that anything is going to happen to you, right? Like, no one ever comes into a situation saying, like, oh, I'm going to have this kind of going on. So that plays a huge role on your psyche, right? As someone
Yes.
who is in my MSW program and doing all of that, that is why I went into all of this, was to learn about that. So I know that that can be challenging. And
Mhm.
so what I say to folks out there again is, there are resources out there, right? So Zero Prostate Cancer, I know I no longer work there anymore, but Zero Prostate Cancer has a really great program out there. It's for Black men, called the Black Men's Prostate Cancer Initiative. That was something that I was a part of, helped create. And I'm so happy to be able to continue to talk about that, because they actually have a support group that's specifically for Black men. And so that support group is actually led by a Black social worker. And so that is one area in which you can get professional help and also be able to share these types of things. Movember, the organization that I'm currently at, I love getting to work there because they actually started off as a men's health organization that addressed mental health. So they've been doing this for 20 plus years. And
Mhm.
so they have a bunch of resources. So check out Movember.com, check out zeroprostatecancer.com. They have incredible resources that can help folks be able to get connected to resources and tools that are out there for anybody that's been diagnosed with prostate cancer and anything else related to men's health. please check out Movember.com. There are so many incredible resources here in the United States in which men are not taking access and advantage of. And like I said, sometime in the middle of all of this, I want to make sure that people feel empowered. I want to make sure that people have access to those resources and tools because they exist. They are here. They are waiting for us to be picked up and taken back to our communities. So, Kipper, I'm going to take you up on that. I think what you said is 1000% right. Like, yes, the onus on that macro bigger piece is on the medical system, but let's take some accountability for us, like as men and as our communities, right?
Yes.
Let anybody that's listening, I challenge you to take some of this information that we've been able to share, go check it out, and then bring it back to your communities, bring it back to your dinner table, bring it back to your partners at the barbershop or wherever, like go to when you're going to the gym, whatever you're doing, like bring it back to your people. And to all the women that are listening, thank you. Listen, 80% of any medical decision is actually made by a woman, and Black women at that. Thank you. We appreciate you. We see you. We honor you. We respect you. We love you. So thank you for that. And let's continue to do this as a team, as a society, as a community, right? Like I said before, this really is the time in our lives. I don't think this has really been a time, there hasn't really been a time, maybe the civil rights movement where Black and brown folks have been able to come together like this. And I think this actually might be to me personally, this is our civil rights movement, right? Is the health piece. So I look at you in the same light that I look at folks that have been doing civil rights movement, right? Like I look at folks like David Moffett in the same light. There's a gentleman, Jeff Fortson, who does such incredible work out there in Atlanta, Georgia. I look at y'all as civil rights heroes in my perspective, because this work is so important in preserving and also pushing our communities and pushing our society and pushing Black and brown folks to continue to survive and do the incredible things that we're doing in our lives. And at the end of the day, it comes down to family, right? We can then be there for our families and continue to do the things that we need to do in our everyday life to show up for folks and support and just honestly live our lives. Like that is what we want to do, right? Live happy and healthy lives. And so that is part of this conversation. So again, Kipper, I really, really, really respect you and really want to say thank you for using your platform to continue to do this work. And all the other incredible folks that are out there, thank you so much. And please feel free, check out Movember.com, check out Zero Prostate Cancer, Prostate Health Education Network. There are so many incredible resources. R. Frank Jones, Urological Society, check them all out. They will be able to provide you with such incredible information.
Kris, thank you, man. Thank you so very much for taking the time to do this. I really appreciate you. Please tell your dad I said hello.
I will.
The great Alvino Bennett. Yes. Yes,
I will, brother. Thank you so much.
Thank you, man, and God bless.
Likewise.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Spirit and Truth. You can subscribe to the show wherever you listen to your podcasts and follow Kipper at Uncle Kipper everywhere on social media.